Hi there, Reject Nation. I'm Greg Alba.
John's my name.
We are going to do the task that when you set out on this mission, you are guaranteed 100% like ratio on a YouTube video.
Guaranteed to succeed.
Never divisive. People always go, hey, those are just their opinions on our YouTube video, but I have my opinions and I'm okay. To each their own. These lists, they're all subjective. I love that that's how everyone usually responds, especially with hardcore fandoms.
Oh, yeah, totally. People who have, spent years of their lives dedicated to these characters are always respectful of us newcomers. And people who have been invested for maybe a little less time but are still enthusiastic. Thanks, guys, for being so sweet.
Really do appreciate that. We're going to rank the 22 MCU films. This wasn't a daunting task.
No, it was really easy. It came out in like 5 minutes.
John and I, we did not sit down together, look at the list, and spend close to an hour going, which would this one be?
I really feel this specific way. Are you okay with moving it maybe up or down the list?
All right, so seriously, we did think each one of these numbers through.
Yes, we did.
We wanted to make sure that we were honest with ourselves and that we were... not trying to just, satisfy anyone's opinions.
Yeah.
We just wanted to make sure we thought every one of these through. Because if the thing is, we did this based off of not doing a giant rewatch and then, deciding which number goes where. We did this just based off which one left the biggest impact on us. Like some of these movies we haven't seen since they've come out, or it's been a while. So just some of them. So going through, we were like, which one really stuck with us? And that's how we sort of organized this on the emotional impact each one of these sort of left us with. Because I feel like when I look at this list, I wouldn't rank any of these below a, if there's like a number out of 10, I wouldn't put any of them below a 5. For me personally, I wouldn't.
I might dip into a 4 for one or two of them. But yeah, for the most part, Marvel's never made a movie that I have just flat out hated or thought was like bad.
Yeah.
Like even the least of them have some elements I appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. So kicking off this list, number 22. Funny enough, this was the movie where I was like, should we move it? Because this is the go-to movie.
This is the answer.
When people are like, oh, Marvel films. I mean, Captain Marvel is a little bit debatable, but with some circles. But for this one has been for the longest time the bad one. And that number 22, Thor: The Dark World. You see, Thor: The Dark World, I actually have a lot of elements about this movie that I do appreciate. I think a lot of the action in it is very cool.
I liked what they were going for sure.
Thor and Loki was cool. I thought the designs were great. Like, there's so much to appreciate about the movie that for me, when it's being exciting, or intending to be exciting, I find it exciting. The thing, though, is... I do not remember most of it, and not because, it's been a long time. It's just a lot doesn't really stick with you. It's kind of a movie that at times, even though there are exciting elements, it can be rather blah, or a little bit of a slugfest to sort of sit through, or sometimes the writing's a little bit annoying. So while I think there's a lot of actually more pros than what most people probably give the movie credit for, I also see why it's sort of like, whatever.
Yeah.
There's no, even the sequences, I only have like fragments in my mind that I remember liking. Nothing really like, oh yeah, that moment,
Yeah, the main association that movie left me with was sort of that it took the things that were successful about the first Thor, the tonal elements and just the different, elements of the world, and disjointed them instead of improving upon them or streamlining them in some ways. So yeah, ultimately it has its moments, but I was not dazzled, and I was bummed because I love Christopher Eccleston too. So
what's number 21 for you, John?
Number 21 is another one we debated, and mostly it's here just because I feel like in a lot of ways it doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the movies, and that is The Incredible Hulk. I mean, there is some really awesome stuff about this, especially like the Abomination fight at the finale and all that. And yeah, again, like with all these, there are elements to be appreciated. But for me anyway, it's the one I think back on and I'm like, this just doesn't even feel... It feels like the one that didn't coalesce with the rest of the series, basically.
Yeah, I'd have a similar thought. You see, the thing is, I put it above Thor: The Dark World because I do think that a lot of the chase sequences I really remember those. Though it's been years since I've seen this movie, but things have really stuck with me. And that fight with Hulk and Abomination, this movie at least has sequences where I remember so much of them because of how much they left an impact on me. Whereas, and I feel like a lot of the in between stuff is pretty dull.
Yeah.
but when it's action, it's really gripping, and when it wants to be intense, I find it pretty intense.
Yeah, and even when it wasn't the ideal Hulk movie, I think for a lot of people it was like, oh, we're getting closer to one, and so for that I got to give it a bit of credit. But
True.
What's next, Gregory? Number 20.
Number 20 would have to be this is what I feel like we'll get crap for. Whatever.
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We got crap for this already when we first did our review for not really loving this film. I like Guardians of the. You'll see on this list, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is a movie that we both really, really love.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there has to be an element of the fact of how high the bar was for Guardians 1 and how Guardians 2. I know it's one of those films where I appreciate so much of the thought, the ideas, the concepts. Just the overall execution for me, it didn't quite work. The comedy was very 50-50 for me throughout a lot of this film. I found it to be a little bit lackluster for a lot of it, but I also get why people love this movie. And that's why it's higher than... Because honestly, I probably like Guardians 2 less than The Incredible Hulk, if I'm being honest. The thing, though, is I can really see why people love this movie. So on a logical, technical scale, I totally get why people love this film, and that's why I put it higher than Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in a lot of ways, it is my least favorite MCU movie, but there are certain aspects of it that are some of my favorites. Like, I love all the Yondu is my favorite stuff in this movie. But yeah, I think a theme of this bottom chunk of our list is kind of the mishandling of characters in some way. And again, I feel like this ended up in this slot because I do see it displeased me because they made a specific choice that I just didn't care for.
Yeah.
And so by going more funny and stripping away some of the heavier elements of the characters, I started to get kind of annoyed by a lot of the elements on screen. So yeah.
But number 19, what is it, John?
Iron Man 2. And this is another movie where I appreciate Whiplash and Justin Hammer quite a bit. In fact, I'd love to see Justin Hammer come back to the MCU in some form.
And Robert Downey is always great. You can always rely on him to be amazing. Yeah.
He is, but just overall, I don't know. There are things about Iron Man 3 I don't like, but as a whole, this one just kind of feels bloated, and it's never as cool and engaging as you really want it to be. I don't know. It's got its moments.
I completely agree with you there. Yeah, I feel like the final moments, especially when Rhodey and Iron Man are shooting all those people down. People. They're just killing a whole crowd of people. No, they're shooting.
They're like drone suits,
But like that moment's cool. There's a lot of cool stuff in it. And I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be over the years. But yeah, it is one of those films where you're like, it's all right.
They're finding their way. They're figuring this out.
Number 18. Okay, here's where. Oh, I can't believe you guys put this. It's higher on the list than Guardians 2. That would be Captain Marvel. If you watch especially our spoiler talk, you'll see that we actually really did like this movie a lot. The reason why it's actually on the lower side here of the list is because the least shining element of the movie, because there's a lot of great things in it. Nick Fury, Ben Mendelsohn, action sequences, a lot of the comedy really worked. Goose. The thing is, the thing most people don't go to, including us, as like one of the main highlights is Captain Marvel herself,
or at least the thing that has been most debated. Because I mean, even between
no, but if we loved loved Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, it would definitely be higher on this list.
Yeah, for sure. And again, going back to that theme of characters.
And I want to say something really quick too. I think Brie Larson has had the hardest time figuring out the character in terms of being an actor for one of these movies.
Yeah.
Because she's given limited amount of homework to do, and she's one of those actresses that seems like she needs a lot of homework in order to get a role down properly.
Yeah.
It's like the same reason why like Daniel Day-Lewis feels like he needs to go to this crazy level of commitment in order to feel like he can do his best. And like she shows up on set for Endgame, doesn't even quite know who she's playing or what her scene is, and that's her first day of filming. You know? And then they're like, okay, let's backtrack here. I feel like she's had the hardest time. So yeah, I'm not dissing her as an actress.
No, not at all. And that's something that I hope I hope in the next Captain Marvel movie she does get the benefit of like, okay, now you're gonna be the one we tell all the secrets to, you know?
She needs that.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on.
Moving on up, we got an Avengers movie, but which one is it? It's part 2.
Endgame.
It's Age of Ultron, which again it has its fun moments, and in fact, one of my favorite MCU scenes is when they're all trying to pick up Thor's hammer. And it does introduce, like, I think James Spader is cool as Ultron, but ultimately, yeah, the funness of the movie wore off for me.
You can feel the lack of enthusiasm behind Joss Whedon in this one.
Yeah.
You can just feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like he's a guy who can make quips happen for days, so it's like it's easy to have fun the first time around. But yeah, the more I think about it, and every time I've kind of revisited parts of it, it just feels overwrought by the end of it.
It feels like the first Avengers feels like Joss Whedon is bringing himself and his passion into it, and this time he's just doing the job.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing the checklist required. So while there are like some funny moments, while there are some great action scenes in here, the villain of Ultron is a bit of a letdown in some of the mechanics of it. We all know the problems with Ultron,
But we did get Vision.
Yes,
We did get Vision.
That is true.
We did get Vision. Moving on.
He truly shined from there on out.
Truly shined. This next one is one we had to debate actually a good amount, and its placement is kind of like the averaging out of our feelings on it.
Yeah.
Definitely a preliminary movie for Marvel, and one that at least the first half I think we can agree on. Would you like to take it away?
Yeah, Captain America, the first Avenger. The first half, I really do like this movie a lot, and that for when it's Steve Rogers focused, even in weird bobblehead looking CGI imposed thing they had going on, even that I really like those elements. And after he becomes Captain America, whenever doing Steve Rogers moments, I'm really much drawn to. There's just the direction of it, on like the way it was directed. It was a bit of a turnoff for me. And I didn't really care for the action moments in it. I felt the last half was rushed. The Red Skull stuff felt very generic. It's like, I get what people are saying. It's supposed to be like one of those, 1940s serial films or whatever the hell they call it. I always... I'm like, I understand. And if you love this, I get it. If you like this Joe Johnston's work, if you like The Rocketeer, and then you watch...
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think also some of the things you're saying may have had to do with the production of the movie, because I actually don't... disagree with some of your criticisms, even though I enjoyed the movie more, but I think he may have been brought on kind of late after somebody else had been left the project or something.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's the movie that just, I love the charms, and I love that by going period with it, they kind of open themselves up for further expansion in genre.
Yeah.
And moving on there for expansions in genre is another kind of underrated first phase Marvel movie.
I think it's very underrated.
Oh, yeah. And actually...
honestly, all these films from here on out, we both agree we really like these movies.
Yeah. And this one comes from one of Marvel's more like eccentric direction choices, and that is Kenneth Branagh's Thor, the first Thor. And
the first Asgardian.
Yeah. And this one, I mean, has a great blend of that fantasy element that Kenneth Branagh is great at bringing a certain level of. I think he was the right choice because he can have it be this fantasy superhero movie, but also give some kind of credence to the more classical elements of it.
It's underrated, I think, especially because of how well it handled bouncing back and forth between, a real commitment to the fantasy land of Asgard and then watching out of life fantastical character Thor, be stuck amongst us humans on Earth.
Yeah.
Because that could have easily been some cheesy 90s movie where the fantasy stuff feels totally cheesy.
Yeah.
But this movie did a great job at making both of it work, because when you're in the Asgardian side of things, you believe it and you take it seriously, and then you have fun when it's on Earth. I think it's very underrated for that department. And even though Thor was serious, he was great at playing the fish out of water stuff, showing early on, like, we want more of that kind of comedy.
Yeah, well, and when they everybody makes a big deal about Ragnarok rebranding Thor, but one of the biggest things that stuck with me was the humor of that first movie.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's definitely not a comedy like Ragnarok, but
but
there's definitely there's humor in it.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, Asgard was a place that some people were like, I never thought I would see them actually make a good Asgard on screen. 14. So.
Well, number 14 for us would have to be Ant-Man.
Yep. All right.
The reason why, because I actually really enjoyed this movie a lot. I think it's a really, really fun movie. It's very Marvel formula.
Yeah.
And even though I think all the actors do a great job in it, there's no character in here that I'm necessarily in love with.
Sure.
You know, like I like Paul Rudd. I like Michael Douglas. I think they all do a great. Like the only character I love is Michael Pena. Yeah. You know, he's not the star of the movie, and I love Michael Pena in the film. But yeah, it does a solid job, and it's funny, and I like the heist element to it. And they made this. I like when Marvel can pull off these ideas that sound like they could be so stupid. Like, you know, I'm sure I don't mean that as an offense to comic book readers. Sometimes you hear these ideas and you think being brought to the big screen
to
that
the
might not
person,
work.
You're like, that might look dumb.
But then they made it work. The Ant-Man thing is cool. Yeah.
And it was a nice splash into the most overt comedy up until that point. So.
And I'm surprised by how smooth it played off, considering the Edgar Wright stages and all that the movie had to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on up, we got another divisive Marvel flick, and that is You'll Never See Me Coming, Iron Man 3, which is another one that I appreciate a lot of. The only thing I don't enjoy about this movie is like the third act when all the Aldrich Killian stuff comes out, and then it becomes just kind of an overwrought, kind of disappointing twist superhero movie ending.
Yeah.
But I mean, as much as the twist with Ben Kingsley pissed people off, I liked that they made a bold choice like that when I thought he was the Mandarin. I thought that stuff was cool too.
And it was funny. Like, we saw that one together, and the first time we watched Iron Man 3, I hated that twist. Hated it. Then as time went on, I moved on with my life. And I revisited the movie. I was like, actually, that scene's really funny. Like, it's a really funny scene. It's an effective twist. The thing of why the effect wears down is because even on just a film point, the Aldrich Killian stuff is nowhere near as effective of everything we had built up for the Mandarin.
No, he's got to be somebody better, not just,
But I think it's really funny, and I think it's one of the best Tony Stark movies.
The personal stuff.
Yeah, because it's so Tony for most of it, and he's barely in the suit in the movie. And so, like, he's literally barely in that suit. Yeah. Totally. And so I like, and I think it's a really entertaining, very Shane Black kind of movie. And
Christmas.
But it's really fun, really fun. Number 12.
Number 12. Oh, I think
we think this is very underrated.
Yeah, and I think we might get some crap for the placement, but Ant-Man and the Wasp, man.
I don't care about it. I think this is a very underrated Marvel movie. Yeah, and it should have made more money.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love the way that this movie kind of the first one, I liked a lot, but the things that Edgar Wright is great at are kind of what I was what I found to be missing. And this one, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I thought they really found their confident footing in how to make this Ant-Man world come to life. They made the shrinking and growing abilities even more cleverly integrated.
The chemistry was better between like Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly. I thought she was better.
And I love the turn away from just having a villain into, even though the plot does kind of go astray in some elements, I liked that the stakes were more the antagonist and you had a lot of different parties all centering around one MacGuffin.
Yeah, And I thought and they enhanced the sci-fi world of the quantum realm. I really I like this movie a lot. Yeah, I do. And I like all this movie a lot. Yeah,
and I like every character.
It's funny, and the action sequences are even really. Sorry for interrupting. The action scenes are very like the car chase movie.
Oh yeah,
the car chase movie. The car chase sequence I think is great. Yeah, so. I think that movie. I think it just came out at the wrong time, and I had to come out because the Endgame linkage. But it just, it was just so tonally different, and everyone was wondering what's going to happen. This is necessary to watch for Infinity War, and you get these heavy stakes. I just think, in a weird way, it was a weird timing for that movie to come out when it did.
Yeah. But of all the Marvel flicks, like if I just wanted to hang out on an afternoon and just like enjoy myself, I would probably reach for that one close to the top.
Yeah, it could have used a better like villain, sure, but I still liked it a lot. Number 11 on this list.
Number 11, we're cresting into the kind of upper goods.
I wanted to say this. This is another one for me where emotionally, I actually like Ant-Man and the Wasp more than this movie. Like on an emotional standpoint, I do. But this movie, I technically see, especially I remember the first time watched. Like it was a rewatch where I didn't like it as much, but the first time I watched it, I really liked it, and it also gave us, in my opinion, the best interpretation of this character, in my personal opinion. John, what is it?
It is Spider-Man Homecoming.
Spider-Man Homecoming.
Spider-Man Homecoming. Tom Holland's first, feature-length film. And yeah, I mean, it's a great coming-of-age story. It's a really fun Spider-Man movie. They get a great balance of, Peter's emotional life, but also the quippy, web-slinging Spider-Man. He's also got a great relationship with Tony Stark in the movie, although that does kind of rub up against one of the conflicts, which is I feel like they kind of, and you brought this to my attention, actually, the kind of absence of the Uncle Ben presence and kind of swapping that out for Tony Stark.
Well, yeah, I mean, it didn't hit me till like this year. But I'm just thinking about.
I didn't want to steal your point.
When thinking about Spider-Man, I did have that feeling of what is the thing that's kind of missing for me about. I couldn't quite put my finger on it because I love Tom Holland's portrayal, and I think he is the best Peter Parker Spider-Man we've gotten. Like, even though his movie isn't my favorite Spider-Man movie, he's my favorite Spider-Man. But I did think that a crucial element to Peter Parker is the loss of Uncle Ben. And we don't even need to see I don't think we needed the loss of Uncle Ben and the origin done again. But if you think about it, so much of the weight and reasoning and moral responsibility and his connection with Aunt May, who's not his mom, but his aunt, of what makes them so strongly, tightly connected, is the loss of Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
And, it's just that
So
emotional
reason for being
that
Spider-Man
emotional weight is kind of what's missing for me in Homecoming, I suppose. Yeah. Of, like, even though I really think it's a super fun movie.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael Keaton as Vulture's great. That emotional weight I could have used a little bit more of, and it's like I get the reasoning to not focus on that. I'm hoping it's kind of explored a little bit in the next one, as opposed to just I want to become an Avenger. I want to satisfy Tony Stark.
Totally. Moving on right up the list then. This is one that I loved a whole lot on. I don't know, like Marvel movies always grab me, especially when they take a pretty sharp left turn, and I love the mystical elements of this movie. Of course, we were talking about Doctor Strange at number 10, and about the time that this movie came out, it just felt like another breath of fresh air for their formula and their the world they were setting up. And to get Benedict Cumberbatch further continuing their reach out into grabbing just all of the best actors right now, know, and just the imagination of the movie and I
like the philosophy
and the
movie.
Philosophical elements too. Like it brings in a mysticism.
And I do think some very inventive, Inception-like, but even more fantastical action scenes in here.
Kaleidoscopic.
I completely agree with the complaint that Stephen Strange develops his powers so fast and becomes like the master of all the mysticism so quick. It's you're like, where's all that stuff where you watch him struggle and figure it out, and how much dedication, how long was he go? I do completely agree with that. But when I let that side of things go, like, a lot of times with movies, does the logical problem of a situation does that interfere too much with your emotional enjoyment of the movie? Sometimes for me, absolutely. Sometimes not. And for me, that side of it, I'm like, I can let that go. I know he's going to be, because there's enough things in there that I really just get a kick out of.
Totally.
So number 9. Woo! Number 9.
I wonder if this will be controversial at all.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I saw this movie 3 times in the theaters, and I thought it got better every single time. And I like, from here on out, I love these movies. We went from whatever about this one to I like this one to I really like this one, and now we're in the I love this one territory. These 9, Infinity War. I like the fan service movie that it is, and the amazing villain that Thanos is, and the action scenes, the epicness, and the collisions of stuff. I really fucking love it. My one gripe about the movie is that I think the middle portion of it I kind of disagree with some of the way this movie is overall paced. I know I get a lot of people greatly disagree with me on that. I just felt like the first part of it is like so fun, so fast paced, so exciting. Then it really slows down, and that part when it slows down, I thought really worked for me the third time I watched this movie. But I had to watch it 3 times to sort of get there. I don't know if that had something to do with like expectation, and because we're going to shoot YouTube videos about it, I really got to pay attention and absorb this movie, instead of just sitting back and just like letting all that shit go, because I wasn't able to get there until the third time watching this movie. And yeah, it's just that middle chunk kind of dilutes some of the pacing for me. And that's really my one gripe about it. Other than that, I love that freaking ending is great. And
it's haunting.
It's a very exciting film, and it's a great villain. So yeah. You know?
Yeah, well, and it was a bold, I don't know, I felt like it was a bold thing for Marvel to not only achieve the greatest crossover up until this point, thus further bringing their comic book world to life, but also leaving us with their first truly heartbreaking, somber note. And I mean, they were smart to be like, no, we're going to follow this up right away. But still, to be left with that and to be allowed to wait with that, did, give me sort of a different kind of emotional attachment to the MCU. So, yeah, definitely, like, it was a movie that every time I've seen it or seen parts of it has gotten smoother, because the first time I was like, whoa, this is so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's pretty terrific what they were able to achieve there.
Exactly. Weirdly, I think Endgame greatly benefits because it's a 3-hour movie, and I think even Infinity War could have benefited off of being a longer. Yeah, exactly. Even Infinity War would have worked as a longer film.
Because like somehow Infinity War to me feels longer.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen them. I've seen both of them 3 times, and I do agree. Like whenever Endgame's done, I'm like, damn, is it? All 3 times I've watched it.
2:15. And speaking of achievements, then
number 8 would have to be Avengers Assemble. You just can't be. Honestly, I think when I watch this at home, I miss the crowd. I do. That's the first time you watch it in the theaters. This movie, the first time, opening night, that was the most rewarding movie-going experience you could possibly ever have, man. Like, they pulled it off. They did it. Of every single element of expectation, could this work? This was, out of any movie to show, like, no, we can make this work. It all rested on this one movie, and they did it. It is a very fun movie. Everything it needed to be. For me, it's not a perfect film, but for what it needed to do, it was perfect. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, it achieves, arguably the impossible, and it also brings it in the best way, made use of Joss Whedon's distinct knack for working with ensembles, for infusing deconstructive humor, and for just being able to that shot where they're all on that splash page, where they're all on screen together in the Battle of New York, like, is one of the most iconic moments. And I just remember at the time, like, this is truly, these kinds of movies now, I do look forward to seeing, like, on opening night with a crowd. And that's not the case for every movie, but, like, I remember both that energy and just knowing lifetime Marvel fans who are friends of mine who have been very picky up until this point about the MCU films, to see them overjoyed and even with Hulk, like with Mark Ruffalo, to see, like, now that they finally got the Hulk like, it was so satisfying. Like, that emotional impact has always stayed with me. So
absolutely. Number 7, this is a very logically chosen one. Because I feel like this movie is most likely like number 1 to 3
on most people's lists.
I feel that. Actually, I told my girlfriend Olivia about where this was, and boy was she mad, because this is her second favorite one, and that's Captain America: Winter Soldier.
It's pretty great.
It's a great. The thing is, it's a great film. It's a great espionage thriller. The action is great.
Bone crunching.
I love where it took the story. I thought this was the defining this is when I really grew to really love Steve Rogers as a character, because he actually had some, like, in terms of actual portrayal, not just the
The
First
idea
Avenger,
of Steve
Bucky,
Rogers,
like because even by the end of Captain America, First Avenger, like, yeah, he's still the lighthearted good guy.
Yeah.
This one you put him in darker territory, and I really like it.
Harsher political climate.
Yeah, and introduction of Falcon and everything. The thing is, it's such a serious movie that I can't always get into it because
You gotta be in the mood.
Yeah, you gotta be in the mood. I'm not always like on the edge of my seat with that movie.
Yeah,
because it's so serious. It's like from the Russo brothers, and there's real no comedy in that movie. Like there's humor that will come into play at times with Falcon and Captain America, but
Maybe
most of
Nick
the
Fury,
movie is a very serious film.
Yeah,
and I can't just always put it on because of that fact.
Yeah, for sure. I feels ya.
Yeah, I could have used a little more fun, I guess, and
to be one that you would want to throw on any old time. Yeah,
like I don't mind. I don't think I love the seriousness of it when I'm in the mood for it.
But
but
if
it's not
you
gonna
were...
it's not gonna transition my mood if I'm already not in the mood to watch it.
But if I was with a larger film fan, and they were just like, "Show me a great Marvel movie," I might put that in my stack of potentials. Like before some of the other ones, definitely. Moving on up. We are at number 6. We're almost to the top 5, and this is another... They're all significant by this point, but this is the one that started it all. Thor: The Dark World. Iron Man, the first Iron Man.
It's X-Men.
Yeah, it's the old Captain America with wasn't Dolph Lundgren or something? Or no, who was Nick Fury? I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, Iron Man.
This
was we saw this together, right?
We saw this together, and we got interviewed for the Reels channel.
Oh yeah,
There's a viral
I said
video.
Stay after the credits.
Stay after the credits.
They put my I think it was before we even did YouTube.
Surprisingly accurate. I remember you said that too. You said the movie was surprisingly accurate.
I thought Iron Man. I've probably seen this one more than any MCU movie, and the reason why is because I used to donate plasma, and they would always have it playing when I was donating. I'd be in that chair for an hour in the waiting room for an hour, and I would just watch all of Iron Man. So I've seen it so many times, but it really is a great film, and. You know what's funny? It is the best at just being a standalone too, because it is the first one.
Because it is the only truly standalone film.
Yeah, it's like they have S.H.I.E.L.D. in there, but it's not. It works in tune with the plot, and seems more like a thing to set up for a sequel as opposed to set up for a universe. Even though that's what they're doing. They do have that post-credit scene, of course, but I think this is just a great film. This is a wonderful. Film that is it's probably its most political movie too.
All that stuff at the beginning, and the crisis that Tony has is all about who he's supplying weapons to, and
the only problem with the movie is the whole thing that became a trope for Marvel. What is the idea that Jeff Bridges hops into the Ironmonger suit and then is
you
the
fight a more powerful version of you,
and becomes like the master of it. Whereas Tony had to spend a while figuring out how this all works, and Jeff Bridges figures out right away. But before that, I think Jeff Bridges is great. I think he's a wonderful Obadiah. He built in a cave with scraps. Scraps. And then even I remember watching that in the theaters, and when he says that with scraps, and then the scientist goes, "Well, I'm not Tony Stark." Everyone laughed and clapped, and this is the first movie, you know.
Yeah.
But we've already gotten to such a great point by that moment, with everything with Tony Stark, that by the time they say that, I didn't read any Iron Man comics. So by the time they said that, I was even clapping because I was like, "Yeah, he's not Tony Stark."
Well, yeah,
Tony's great.
And that movie just introduces its lead characters so flawlessly, and it has so many great moments that, when you think back on again great MCU images, a lot of Iron Man moments come to mind, a lot of the emotional beats come to mind, and a lot of long enduring characters, man. Jon Favreau really taking a turn in his career too.
Tony and Pepper, Robert Downey Jr. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful movie.
Yeah, and Terrence Howard, man.
I don't know what the word is on this, but I did prefer Terrence Howard as Rhodey.
I liked his
I thought their chemistry was perfect in that, and I don't really feel for the chemistry between Don Cheadle and Robert Downey, because I think Don Cheadle is actually an amazing actor.
I love Don Cheadle.
I just don't really feel for the chemistry that he has with Robert Downey Jr., where I really feel like Terrence Howard and Robert Downey are friends. You know?
Yeah. No, I totally get you.
What's number 5, John? You take this one away.
Number 5 is a recent-ish one, and it's Thor Ragnarok, man. It gave us Jeff Goldblum in the MCU. It gave us the most humor we've ever had in the MCU. It's basically just a Taika Waititi joint with Thor elements adorned upon it, but it is so much fun, and it is a shot in the arm that not everybody loved, I know, but a lot of people loved. And it's just such a confident.
I feel like most people loved. I think the people who don't like it just had a pretty strong voice, but I think most people love this movie.
Yeah. And it's got a very confident, very colorful, and very whimsical element to it that really just helps further expand both the fantastical and cosmic elements. And I don't know, man. And also, I mean, the Thor Hulk relationship is one that a lot of people really love, and that has since grown past that in Endgame and stuff.
And not just Hulk, and Bruce Banner.
And Bruce, yeah.
Valkyrie, the villain of Hela. And I also think this movie doesn't get enough credit for the way it's shot. Like, sure, is it primarily a comedy? Yeah, but there are some beautiful imagery in this movie.
Yes.
It's more than just Taika Waititi doing his, improvise. It is genuinely a wonderfully shot film with some great action in it as well. It is, I think, a very, very, very entertaining film, and one that really sticks with you. I think it's one that really, really just gets you.
Yeah, well, it has a great theme beyond all the humor and stuff like that about Asgard at the end, about how, it's not about the chunk of land that you live on necessarily. It is the community that you have with you. It is the people. Asgard is a people,
Well, I can't think of a standalone film that introduces so many new characters who are not major players. I think there's an argument to be made for something like Black Panther, perhaps, but Thor Ragnarok, not only is everyone hailing this revamp of Chris Hemsworth's portrayal of Thor, and of course the brother relationship with Loki, but everyone's talking about what they did with the Hulk and Bruce Banner. Yes, a big player, but also Valkyrie,
Grandmaster
Korg. These characters. You're like, who are these guys?
Yeah,
they're great.
And now they're back in other things,
and now we're excited when they're there.
Yeah.
These are. I think it deserves the credit it received.
Oh, yeah.
Number 4 would have to be Captain America Civil War. Oh. This movie, I do not like the criticism of any MCU film.
At all.
They're all perfect. I don't like the criticism of, when someone says, the issue with it is you have to see the other ones in order to appreciate it, or in order to really love. Like, I would rank it higher, but the problem is you have to see the other one. I'm like, well, that's kind of what makes the MCU special, because they're one of the very few. Well, yeah, it's the franchise that has that unique touch to it because of the connective tissue all the films have. That I've always viewed this as the greatest, most expensive TV show we've ever had to pay to watch. Like one of those things, because that criticism doesn't bother me, because that's kind of the point of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is. That's the point, whereas other franchises seem to try to emulate it for a reason, because that's not organic with a lot of the other franchises, where this one, that was the initial inception for what they wanted to do. And Civil War, I think, does a great job at it's essentially an Avengers movie in a lot of ways, but with Tony and Cap as the central focus of the film. And I love the superhero debate they decide to have in it, the conflict you don't really know. Like, I guess I get where both of them are coming from in the movie. And, some people really do side with Iron Man in that film, and some people really do side with Captain America in the movie as well. I think that it's a wonderful film with amazing action sequences and the right amount of humor. It's overall a serious film, but there's a pretty good amount of humor by the time you get to Spider-Man and Ant-Man, and then they decide to have the airport battle. Those are just so... Like, how can you forget that? Bucky grabbing the bike when they're chasing under the freeway, or the introduction of Spider-Man. There's so much. Black Panther.
I think
I think this is an epic film And even though on rewatches, I feel like the airport battle is kind of inconsequential and not overall necessary to the movie, it's still a great fight, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's a movie, for myself, I often draw a distinction between movies and films, for certain things, just as kind of a semantic thing. And sometimes I feel like Marvel makes Marvel movies, and sometimes they make Marvel films. And this one, up until that point, was one that struck me as like the best synthesis of both. Because it's got all those soaring heights that like a blockbuster spectacle has, that all of the Marvel movies have, but also has some weight and some emotional resonance of an actual, like, I'm watching like a kind of a serious film that's bothering to have this debate about the ethics of heroism and stuff like that. And it's funny, because we got multiple movies around that time trying to talk about that idea, and I thought they did a decently successful job, at least, of using those issues to fuel the thrust of the movies. So this one definitely left an impression, and at least at the point that I saw it, was definitely, from the first viewing, one of my favorites.
Number 3 would have to be Oscar-winning movie.
Segueing right out of Civil War,
Black Panther. Black Panther. Killmonger's my favorite villain. Who would win in a fight between Thanos and Killmonger? Obviously Thanos, I don't know.
No, Thanos, Killmonger was shooting.
Yeah, Killmonger's in one bullet. Whatever Black Widow was prepping for that's not in the Endgame movie.
Right.
I think Killmonger is the best character portrayed villain ever from the MCU. I love Thanos, sure. I really do think he's a wonderful villain in Infinity War, and he is a much bigger threat. But Killmonger, I love how personal it was with him, to the point where you're like, with Thanos, you're kind of like, I get what he's doing, I don't agree. Killmonger, I go, I really get where this guy's coming from.
Well, and because the movie is rooted in some real life circumstances and real life culture, you get the extra benefit of having a very easy to access, emotional drive for his character. And so even if you don't necessarily agree with his master plan, you do understand his philosophy a whole lot, and it's very lived in that regard.
I think it's really intense. Honestly, out of all these movies, it was probably the first MCU movie that had moments that brought me to tears. And it's an epic, and I think that because of how hyped it was, crossing $1 billion and everything, like all the recognition it got, of course, then started opening the door to a lot of people hating on this, saying it's overhyped, it's not as great as people make it out to be. Some saying it's even one of the worst ones of the MCU.
It has elements of superhero movie to it. I mean, I don't honestly love like the subway fight at the end, the rail train fight. But overall, I mean, they even bring in more of the genre splicing with the sort of spy movie heist stuff towards the top, and then again all those cultural things, and they do bother to have a sort of global socio-political, at least subtext, touched upon in the movie.
And I can't think of any wasted actors in it, whereas a lot of these, it's like you got like the Guardians of the Galaxy 1, which has Glenn Close in it. You're like, what the fuck does she do? Whereas in this movie, you can have a really small role for like Denai Guerrera or Forrest Whitaker.
Clark Duke.
Clark Duke? Winston Duke?
Oh, I'm sorry. Clark Duke. Oh my God, Winston Duke. It's been a long week. But Clark Duke, you would be great. Throw him in there with his little glasses and
Even Martin Freeman, even the white guys are great in the movie. Andy Serkis.
All two of them.
I think it's a wonderful film, and it's always been like number 3 on my list, and it's never swayed from there.
Well, I love the joy that this movie sparked too, because the amount of just people out there who were touched by, I mean, I'm sure some people are going to roll their eyes at me, but like, to so many people to feel represented by that movie.
All the Mexican people who watched this movie.
And all the Asian folks.
They're like, thank God we're being represented.
But, I mean, there hopefully will be more doors flying open for more and more cultural acceptance. But that was just a really wonderful thing to see the people. Like, this was one, I don't love social media, especially surrounding, certain geek culture topics. But this was one where it was just really nice to see how much joy it brought many people. So
I agree. One of my favorite memories is watching a family take a photo at the theater and wanting to remember that night
in front of that giant poster.
I'll never forget that. Number 2, even though I just had a little criticism towards it, is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Volume 1.
Hey, there are things you can nitpick in all these movies.
This is personal preference. This is just my kind of movie.
Yeah,
honestly, like I love sci-fi. Sci-fi is one of my favorite genres, one of the most underrated genres. Like even though the sci-fi could be a big blockbuster juggernaut, it's like I think prestige-wise, it's kind of overlooked. And Guardians of the Galaxy ensemble piece, they're all great. They had to nail all the Guardians, and they got them all down, you know. And they're all introduced. The world building, the humor, the music, the spectacle. I mean, sure, Ronan the Accuser is not a wonderful villain, but you know, I don't really care about that because everything else really fucking excels him. And Ronan has to, you know, show up and beat up Drax. It's fine. It builds the stakes, you know. I believe they hated him, and I believe they, like, even though when we check in with him, he's not great. The makeup on him's cool, but you know, I thought the way the characters responded to the villain was wonderful. Maybe the villain himself wasn't great. Either way, it's a super fun movie.
Oh yeah.
And I love the emotion in it. It has so much heart. It's a beautiful film to me, and very inventive, very unique.
Oh yeah. Well, and this is one that I appreciated too at the time because it was up until that point one of the most like, whoa, they're really expanding their horizons with this, you know, going full space opera now, which was just a gratifying thing as a person who personally just likes when people mix in more and more elements and diversify and stuff like that. And it was also really satisfying because up until that point I had been a fan of James Gunn. And I don't always love his tone of voice, but in that movie, I feel like he got a great balance of some of the most humor up until that point we'd had for Marvel. Also, you know, some actual sci-fi stuff, some actual, you know, character beats that were resonant and that really endeared me to the group. And it really felt like a Marvel movie that was very much helmed by its director. Like, I was like, wow, they really let him make a James Gunn movie out of this.
That's a big point. That's a great point because out of all the MCU movies, that style is so definitive that the thought of when James Gunn was temporarily fired, you're like, no one's going to want to touch this. No one's going to touch this. You know? Like, even though I think like, what Taika Waititi did for Ragnarok was amazing. You know, a lot of people thought that because of Guardians, it gave Thor Ragnarok the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So Guardians, out of all of them, have such a definitive style that you just wouldn't want to get a different director attached to it. And that's something pretty special about a film, about a franchise that relies so much on connectivity that you can swap out directors.
Yeah, and it just it expanded the imagination, and it was one of those checkpoints of being dazzled again by the end. Because it's like, you know, each phase has a couple points that will actually really wow me beyond what I'm kind of used to, you know. And that was definitely one of them. So,
well, number one,
you guessed it.
You've heard us say it before.
Justice League.
Yeah. You've heard me say this a billion times. I've seen this 3 times officially. Go watch it in IMAX. It's amazing. It is Avengers Endgame. To me, this is personally the perfect representation of the MCU. It rewards the fans. It knows how to do fan service in a way that isn't just fan service. It's not the opening shot of Age of Ultron, you know.
It feels like fan appreciation more than fan service.
And I think out of any MCU movie, it earns, like, I think when they're time traveling, are there like fan service shots? Sure, yeah. But for the most part, it's very story based.
They all, for the most part, make sense.
It's not just fan service moments, you know, like, hey, let's look back at the time travel moments and go, hey, remember that moment? It's not that. Those moments add more intensity to the story. Things go wrong. It's really great. I love the build up to it. But my point is, the build up to the finale where you start getting like the most ultimate fan service you can think of is earned. You can't. There's other movies beyond the MCU, but definitely within the MCU that have fan service stuff where you're like, oh gosh, just fan service. You know, it's not really necessary. But when you get that shit in the finale, it is so earned. The action is so earned because there's barely any action before that, you know? And it's so harrowing and hard leading up to it that when you start getting it, it still feels, even though like, oh, the shot of all the women, you know, giant Ant-Man, you know, putting a Hulk and Rocket in his hand, the whole crowd of people, Captain America saying Avengers Assemble, really Mjolnir, Stormbreaker, and the hammer, and like so much of those things, they still feel within story somehow, and not just fan service.
Yeah.
So
they feel just even more out into the comic book realm, you know.
Yes.
Like, and it, I feel like each,
and it feels like a true epic. You know,
it really does. It has all that scope and all that scale, and like it's all up there on screen. I mean, you understand why these movies take so much to produce. And this movie, I think, it really does just encapsulate the MCU. Partly too because of the way it uses previous movies and even improves upon previous movies and ties up little whole. Like it does. Even in its form, in a way that doesn't feel cheesy, make you appreciate all the time spent, and all the different places that we've been over time. And it was one movie. It's like Infinity War already had to achieve the impossible by living up to so much hype. And then this movie had to do that again. And one thing that really struck me is the first time I saw it, I realized there was a moment where, there were times early on when they made choices where I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to get a movie that's as interesting as I'm hoping it will be. But I realized at a certain point, I forgot about whatever expectations, and I was just locked into the movie and completely wrapped and just on board for the emotional catharsis of the adventure.
It's perfectly paced, and it's so character-driven.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like 3 hours.
It's so like everyone is dealing with grief in their own ways. When you do that 5-year later jump, it is dealing. I had a long talk with a different patron, Adelia Chamberlain, about this, where it is a study of like how would these guys be grieving in this moment, and like Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner Hulk, he's the one who learns to find the positive and acceptance in this grieving stage and get into the gamma ray place for over a year and figure this out. Thor becomes an alcoholic and gains a bunch of weight. Tony has trying to move forward. Cap is trying to like do support. Like it's so wonderfully character driven. Hawkeye, of course, it's so wonderfully character driven, and I feel like a lot of the other movies that are even character driven are still trying to balance it out with like, well, structurally we should probably get an action scene in here. You think about those things here, you're trying to like, oh, we gotta increase the stakes. This one didn't care about that.
It feels unencumbered by the needs of a comic book blockbuster, and it feels completely beholden to the needs of its own story. Which is how it all ought to be.
The reason why our spoiler talk was an hour and 20 minutes, and it could have been longer, honestly.
Well, and the other thing too is we talk about subversion all the time, but one thing that's also great is like I remember you brought this up with the way everybody comes back. It's like the movie has you so into it that you don't even, at least for both of us, I wasn't even thinking about where everybody else was. And that's the big thing that Infinity War leaves you with. Most of us who follow the movie news all day sit there and go, well, they're all coming back. And that didn't hamper this movie at all for me, which is like amazing that they were able to just completely brush past that, And
I've never been so emotionally swept up by any of the MCU films as much as like this. I've never actually hailed any of the MCU movies as one of my favorite movies. Endgame is probably just one of my favorite movies. Because of what it managed to pull off, the scope, and it was cool watching it a third time when you're not with it was obvious that even though the theater was primarily full, most of those people had already seen the movie before, so it wasn't a crowd of a bunch of cheering and oh my god, I can't believe I'm seeing this. There was literally like one guy because it was obvious, oh, this guy hasn't seen it yet.
Go, Cat!
There was like one guy going, oh wow. Like after Thanos his head cut off, like 5 years later, he goes, "Oh wow."
That was my response actually the first time.
But when you watch it with a crowd, it's different, and it can be easy to just feel the crowd, and then you go, "Oh, now that I watch it without a crowd, it's really not as great." This movie, watching it with with a tame crowd, where it's not like fucking crazy bananas, I was like, "Oh no, this is still my favorite one. This is still the best one." Okay. I'm still crying.
Now you have to go towards the end of its theatrical run when there's like 3 people in the theater, and that's the final test. And a shitty theater down the street.
So
watch it alone on your phone.
That movie is awesome.
It's something special, and again, it's one of several moments that Marvel has really been able with their cinematic universe to bring. You just feel the community, even if you're only in a theater full of a few people. You just feel how many people are communing over this, and that bringing people together that way and making people celebrate that way is, as many ways as there are to be cynical about that, I always feel that in my soul jelly, and I'm always really happy when that happens.
It's funny how the elements of how do I put this? There are elements in here that are divisive. Captain America time travel. What happened? How does it work exactly? And there's a pretty big divide on the handling of Black Widow's death. Beyond that, it blows my mind that they managed to wrap up so many things and for the most part satisfy people.
And things you weren't even expecting them to go wrap up.
It boggles my mind how oh damn, they did it. I thought out of all of them that this would have the hardest time and probably I thought this would be the most divisive Avengers movie. But man, did they do it.
Movies like this make me tense.
Yeah.
Just the prospect of Avengers Endgame is
another Last Jedi.
There's so many ways this could go wrong. This has to be amazing. You reach a point where you have to be great, otherwise you're going to have a frenzy of people,
you have to be great or else you're terrible. It's just the thing it is, the way our culture is. Yeah. But anyway, guys, do you stick around this long?
Do you like season 8 of Game of Thrones?
How would you rank it?
Yeah, how would you rank it?
Put your
Instead of
below.
Calling us assholes, just list your own ranking.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you so much for requesting this, buddy. Guys, go check out his YouTube channel, does movie reviews, talks a lot about wrestling.
And sign his petition to become the new Wolverine.
Did you really make one?
If not, sincere? He should. Oh, no.
I thought you were being sincere.
No,
I was like, damn.
I wish he would have. Well, now I am sincere. Let's start one. Somebody start one.
He is 2'5".
I know. He's the right weight. All he's got to do is grow out his, big old sideburns. Don't tease your hair up on the sides.
All right, guys. You can subscribe to the Reject Nation. Click that notification bell. We'll see you guys soon.
Mwah.